All right. Okay, Dr. Bill Pettit, take it away.
Thank you. Feel a little bit like I've following the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and where I don't know the hip hop, I guess Taylor Swift. Uh, so I have to put my ego aside and know that I don't have to be as good as anybody who spoke. All I have to do is be myself. I know many of you, and there's many of you that I don't know. I'm a psychiatrist who met Mr. Banks back in 1983, and he was here with me with my 26 and a half years of education, and he with his 9 grades of schooling. He was my mentor for 26 years until he passed in 2009. And then, as Linda mentioned, about 15 months ago, I really was in incredible pain, and it disrupted 5 major events that she had planned for a year and a half in Europe that she was going to be presenting, and she had to cancel them, or did cancel them, to be with me. And I since then met Steve Hardison, I met Steve Chandler. I had met before, and I really feel that the day I stop listening is the day that I stop learning. I really believe that. And both listening inside, which most importantly, I think, but also listening externally to people that awaken me more, not like Linda said, not awaken wisdom more, but awaken me to the wisdom that is coming through every moment of my life. It's interesting. This morning, I woke up about 1 a.m. this morning, and we're here in Arizona on the equivalent of Pacific Daylight Time or Mountain Standard Time. We stay on it. When it's 115 degrees, you don't really want another hour of sunlight. But I awoke, and it was interesting. What happened is I started these G's started coming to me, a whole bunch of G's. So this will, and then the last one was the patience. So this will be a PG 5, parental guidance 5. And the words that came to me and that I'm going to speak to are gratitude, being gentle, goodwill, awareness of the grade, and graciousness. And actually a 6th one, which some people will be old enough to remember, a man's name who was a hockey player named Gordie Howe. And there's a reason why he came to mind. So I am a adjunct faculty at Creighton University's School of Medicine here in Phoenix, which is a separate second medical school from the one in Omaha. And I graduated from the undergraduate back in 1965. So you can do the math on that. Be having my 83rd birthday coming up, as I said. But in the outside of the library, the beautiful $100 million building, which has been gifted through a trust, when I think if there are some people who are in judgment of wealth, and I've lost any judgment of the creation or the accumulation of wealth, because we can only share what we have. And because of the wealth that someone accumulated, there's this $100 million beautiful building that houses all the medical sciences of medicine, pharmacy, nursing, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. And I also have slowed down enough finally in my life to be in service to my community. Once a month, I'm in service at the St. Vincent de Paul free medical clinic at the south end of Phoenix. where they house, I don't know how many thousand people they homeless they house each day. I know they serve 4,000 meals a day. And the medical clinic, which has faculty, medical students, and residents from 3 different medical schools, um, is pristine. It's pristine. It's a Queen of England could feel comfortable in this free medical clinic. And I think what a way to show these people who are struggling in this form of life, this spiritual theater called life, that they are the same divine energy as everybody else, and they deserve the same care, respect, and love as anybody else. On the second floor of the medical school, I did a presentation this last Saturday to parents of prospective young people that were going to be looking towards medical professions. And I asked them what to them was my topic that I had for 30 minutes was to talk about is what was important way for them to support the mental health of their children. And they said things like um, honoring their feelings and different things. And I said, well, what about if the answer was your own mental well-being is the most important thing for you supporting the mental well-being of your family. The Surgeon General, as you know, in recent weeks has said we have 2 crises. One is our young people. We've got 15 to 24. I forget the statistics. Isla, you may know them, but I think it's something like 25% of them have thought about ending their life. And then we've got, he said, our research recently has shown that over half of our parents are waking up every day overwhelmed. On the wall into the second floor medical school library is that famous quote that actually is attributed to, but people have trouble finding where he actually said it, but it's attributed to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. I can't probably say it very well, that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that certainly has been the theme of everything that's been said so far. And I went to this morning, I was moved to look at the other quotes, and I've looked at them before, of this famous Jesuit who was a brilliant scientist, besides being a Jesuit priest. And these are some of the quotes, and I think they go along with what has been said by you, Isla, by Stephen, by Linda. Here was one I'd never heard. Love is an adventure and a conquest. It survives and develops like the universe. Love is the affinity which links and draws together elements of the world. Love, in fact, is the agent of universal synthesis. Wow. Wow. There is neither spirit or matter in the world. Talk about non-duality. The stuff of the universe is spirit matter. Can't separate them. They're a manifestation of the same energy. No other substance but this could have produced the human molecule, for those mitochondriasts. Huh? For those, no other substance but spirit matter could have produced the human molecule. And then, of course, the one that some people I'm sure also know, someday, after mastering the winds, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And then for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. I'm not going to tell stories. Many of you have heard many of them, but 6 months after I met Mr. Banks, I was in a state hospital. And it's a long story why. And the psychologist that had invited me to be the co-leader, his panic disorder had disappeared in 6 weeks of us having lunch, his anxiety disorder of almost 30 years. And as he asked me to co-lead this group, and this group was 21 men in a state hospital who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. We sometimes call them schizophrenics or bipolars. No, they're human beings who have, through innocent lack of understanding of the system of life and the spiritual nature and the connection, the formless nature of life and its connection to the formed psychological experience and physiological experience. And so I was talking to them about these three principles of universal mind, thought, and consciousness as a metaphor for what people usually, the nature and the attributes of what people call God, which is that it's pure love. Nature is pure love. The attributes are that that energy is intelligent, it's conscious, and it's creative. And that we have been given these gifts, these same gifts that have created the galaxies and the dark energy and everything that you and I see. And even this little marker that I'm holding up has atoms in it. And around each atom are electrons going 3/4 the speed of light. Wow. Where in the hell is that come from? The third session of that day, the third session on Wednesday with that group, this man in the left corner, and this was the first of hundreds that I've experienced over the last 40 years of people that had been labeled with severe, quote, mental illness. This man started laughing, and he started laughing, not just giggling. He started laughing like most of us have experienced, where people were holding their stomachs, their eyes were watering, begging him to stop. Can I see at least a show of hands? Has anybody had that happen where you're begging the person, just stop it, just stop it? He didn't stop. It went on for 7 to 10 minutes. He'd have aftershocks. He'd stop, and then he'd have another insight. He stopped, and I said to the young psychologist who kept telling me I was full of poop, only he used a different word that begins with S, thinking that everybody was divine energy, and thus everyone was had mental well-being, pure mental well-being, but for their understanding, but for their use of the divine gift of thought. I said, "What's his name?" He said, "His name is Herb." I said, "How long has he been here?" He said, 47 years. I said, "Herb, would you be willing to tell us what was so funny?" For the first 2.5 sessions, he had his chair askew, talking quietly to his auditory hallucinations. I had not interrupted him because he was quiet. He picked up his chair, he looked across the room at me. And some people, I've been accused in London one time, I was accused of lying, making this up. And I will tell people, I lied when I was younger sometimes, when it was convenient. Long past that day, I have to go to bed every night with what I say and do. I don't lie. I honor both you and I by not doing that. I said, "Herb, could you tell me what was so funny?" He said, "Doctor, while you were talking, I suddenly realized that I've been making myself crazy for 47 years with my own thinking, and I don't have to do it anymore." I was shaken. I was truly shaken. I didn't sign up for this. I hadn't seen that. When I met Mr. Banks 6 months before, as I sat in the audience with 250 people, I realized that I had been making myself depressed, not my genes, not my circumstances, not my history, not my past lives. I had been making myself going in and out of clinical depression for 20 years and had seen 6 different psychiatrists because 6 to 9 hours a day, metaphorically, I was smashing my fist against my head, wondering why at the end of the day I had another damn right-sided headache. But I saw that I was the source of my depression. I didn't, and hope got awakened because now this is something that I'm doing. If it's caused by these things that I have no control of, I'm screwed. But I didn't see but hope got awakened that maybe I could learn to not hit my fist into my head so hard and not quite so often. But here this man, and Sid used to say, Mr. Banks used to say, Bill, you're going to point sometimes and people are going to see what you're pointing to, but some people are going to see beyond what you've seen. And at that moment, they become your teacher. Now, I would be okay with that if that was Stephen or Isla or many or Linda or many of the other speakers today, but I wasn't expecting it to be a man who had been in the state mental hospital for 47 years. It took me 6 weeks to get him out of the hospital. 6 weeks. I had to get him off all his medicines, his 10 medicines, 9 or 10 medicines, very, very rapidly, as safely as I could, because his physiology in that instant had changed everything back to completely mentally. All his mitochondria were now working well in all his 50 trillion cells. I had a 3-year follow-up that he did fine. He was never on medications again. He lived in an apartment. He danced. He had a girlfriend. He has buddies, and his girlfriend used to go to movies and dance and play bingo. And that was the first of hundreds of examples that I could be telling stories for 24 hours. And it's not about Bill Pettit. It's about awakening to the presence of divine wisdom at the core of our being, that's what we're made of. I'm going to go to my G's in the time that I have left here. What came to me this morning, and I think these are all manifestations of when we awaken, as Linda said, to that wisdom that is always coming there. I come out of retirement after about over 5 years of retirement from clinical practice, where I was creating courses and a whole bunch of other things, but not doing clinical psychiatry. At 82, I'm out of retirement, and I do a telehealth clinic every Monday for a clinic in Michigan, and it's about 35 beautiful, wonderful human beings who are addicted to opioids and who are receiving Suboxone as a replacement. And I have started this little book of Mr. Banks called The Missing Link. You can see, those of you who don't know, it has as much space as it has written material. I've got a contract with each one of those 35 patients of mine, clients, that we're going to read 6 pages every 28 days. So in 2 years, we will have completed the book. Now, you can read this book in 45 minutes, but we're going to really read it. And I'm going to read from that because I think it's appropriate. The little two of the 6 pages that I read to each one of mine in the last 2 weeks, and to see there's some miracles are going to start happening. People think they're miracles, but they're not. They're not exceptions to the rule. They're the rule in action. They're the rule. Viktor Frankl, Gandhi, Martin Luther King were not exceptions to the rule. Pooh Bear is the other one. They're not exceptions to the rule. They are the rule in action. Each living soul experiences life as an individual. This is why all humans live and see a separate reality. No 2 people have ever walked the earth and used the power of thought in the same way. The divine truth, however, that's my however, the divine truth that lies within each living soul never changes. It's eternal. The divine passes from the formless to form. And as human beings, we are both spectators and participants in this spiritual theater called life. This stapler, the flowers, the lemon tree in the backyard, they are all spectators. They are all participants in this spiritual theater. They all have electrons going 3/4 the speed of light around every atom. But we as human beings get to be spectators. We can know that that's what we are. And we can also do what the lemon tree can't do. We can ignore the divine wisdom that's speaking to us every moment and listen instead to our intellect. And then wonder why things go to hell in a handbasket, as my mother used to say. The great mystics of the world, and this is just this page, who tried to explain such knowledge, had no choice but to speak in metaphors, knowing that their words were only a representation of the spiritual wisdom that lies within the consciousness of all human beings. I'll call him John Smith. I had somebody recently who had 50 years depressed. He said, "Doctor, I don't think I have that spiritual wisdom within my consciousness." And being a mischievous child and a mischievous 82-year-old, I said, "John, my gosh, there's an asterisk here. I feel so silly. I've read this book so many times." He said, "What does the asterisk say?" I said, "It resides within the spiritual wisdom, resides within the consciousness of all human beings, except for John Smith." I said, "Oh, John, I am so sorry. I'm sending a check this afternoon. What's your favorite sports team? Let's talk sports. Let's not waste any time. You don't have it. I'm sorry." Then he started laughing, and I said, "John, I got bad news. You don't get to be special. You have to be like the rest of us. You have to be divine wisdom in a form. All human psyches," as Linda said, this is in italics. It's not in bold print. This is what allowed me to talk to Herb and to hear Herb that he hadn't had a flight into health. He was truly back into his health. All human psyches are rooted in universal truth, and no person's psyche is better than any other's. That's revolutionary, is it not? Only to the degree of the individual's psychological and spiritual understanding does it appear to vary. Only to the degree of the individual's psychological and spiritual understanding does it appear to vary. I want to sit with that for just a minute before I go forward. I moved to remember a quote that Thomas Insel, who was the medical director, psychiatrist of the National Institute of Mental Health from 2005 to 2015, I think, or 7 to 16. We are so embedded in this structure. We have spent so much time diagnosing mental disorders. We actually believe they are real. There's no reality. They're constructs. No reality to schizophrenia or depression. We might have to stop using terms because they are getting in our way, confusing things. Whatever we've been doing for 5 decades, it ain't working. When I look at the numbers, the number of suicides, the number of disabilities, the mortality data, it's abysmal. It's not getting any better. All the ways in which we've approached these illnesses with a lot of people working very hard, the outcomes we have to this point are pretty bleak. And as long as we do not enter into the equation our spiritual nature, they will continue to be. But if we enter in the spiritual nature, and I have become active in my district, I'm going to get to talk about the 3 principles at the annual meeting of the APA in Arizona district branch next April. And I'm so excited. I'm going to be one of 5 speakers, and I'll be the only one talking about this spiritual understanding. I'm hoping that that is a stepping stone to going to the national meeting the following year. So here's the G's to me that are kind of an outgrowth of listening to wisdom and experiencing love. As Linda said, Sid always said that wisdom is always wrapped in a positive feeling, always. Grateful for what I've seen and have, rather than upset about what I haven't. Grateful. I encourage people to be gentle to myself and to others. Once we see psychological innocence, true psychological innocence, it doesn't mean that we condone hurtful behavior to ourselves or others, but we see that people are truly doing every moment of their life. Every time we've made mistakes, it was a matter of the best we saw to do at that moment, or we would have done different. Good G, the third one, goodwill. Where there is goodwill, there is always a way. When wisdom is being listened to, it comes via a feeling of love, of goodwill. The fifth thing that came to me this morning is grade awareness. And here's what I mean by that. Between Phoenix and Flagstaff is you go from 1,000 feet to 7,000 feet. So when you're going up the mountain, it's a little harder. When you come down the mountain, you have to be sure you're not going too fast. And I think it's important in life as we go through things. And the other things were graciousness, which I looked up the definition. It came to me, the word gracious. To be gracious to ourselves and others means pleasantly kind, benevolent, courteous. And to know that this divine energy is gracious, it's benevolent, it's beneficent. And the last thing with G was Gordie Howe, who played professional hockey until he was 52 years old. Pardon me? Most people retire when they're in their late 30s because he knew that he had to conserve his energy, but he also knew when to move quickly and with action, as Stephen was talking about and Linda and you spoke about. It's not that we just sit around looking at our navel. We go into action, but we don't exhaust ourselves with meaningless action. He would suddenly elbow somebody, knock them off their feet, grab the puck, and score at age 52 or 51. He played with his sons. And the last thing I'll say is to be patient with ourselves and others, because direction is the key. Direction, not speed. If I'm here in Phoenix and I want to get to Alaska, far better that I be going 10 miles an hour north than 85 miles an hour south. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you so much. I laughed and cried and I felt things. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, that was so lovely.